All right.
I think we're live now.
We're live. All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, welcome in to the Sportscast. My name's Nick Rossetti, and today's date is April 2nd, 2021. If you haven't yet, please subscribe in all our channels, YouTube, Periscope, and Apple Podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and review. It helps us out tremendously. And visit us on thesportscast.net. Also, follow us on Twitter at the Sportscast1 and check out our app, the Sportscast, in the iOS App Store. Obviously, really excited to be talking to you guys on this Good Friday. Joined by a star-studded cast here, and really excited to chat about some hoops that we got going on with the Final Four, transfer portal, and everything that includes in college basketball. So, firstly, want to start by introducing our panelists. Erwin Dudley, a former Alabama basketball player. Roll Tide to that, Erwin. I'm not sure if you know my background, but I graduated from UA in 2017. So excited to connect. You were actually on the last Alabama team that won the SEC regular season title and an All-American in 2002, an SEC Player of the Year in 2002 as well. Nicholas Hodel at Hodel Sports on Twitter, student at Arizona State University, and host of the College Bonanza podcast, and the regular Jordan Vargas at The Real JDV 23, Sportscast NBA contributor, also host of Best of Hoops podcast on the Sportscast every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And also you host your own podcast, Courtside with Jordan Sports podcast on the CWJ. Mm-hmm. Gentlemen, a lot to get to here today. Obviously, the matchups are set for a Final Four meeting this weekend. Tipping off tomorrow, we have the number 11 seed UCLA versus the number 1 seed Gonzaga. Gonzaga, as of right now, sports betting lines are a 14-point favorite per the Williams Hill Sportsbook. And we also have number 2 seed Houston versus the number 1 seed Baylor, right now also contributing to the Williams Hill Sportsbook. Baylor is a 5-point favorite. Mm-hmm. Before we get into the games and analyze the matchups, guys, I really just want to reflect on this tournament, reflect on the games and all the aspects that we've had from the 2021 March Madness. Starting with you, Jordan, tell me just a little bit about, what were some of the games that you were most excited to see, the matchups that kind of lived up to what you expected, and tell me a little bit about, what your overall thoughts have been about the tournament so far.
Well, I think the tournament so far has done extremely well, especially during times like these, with the pandemic going around. It seemed like the NCAA really controlled it and allowed March Madness to happen in its full effect. The total fan engagement and player engagement was incredible. It felt just like, it used to. And when it comes to the games, I think it was really good seeing teams that you wouldn't usually think of are going to be in the tournament participate and actually do extremely well. And I'll give one example is Loyola Marymount. Loyola Marymount a couple of years ago was a Cinderella story of college basketball. They were like 11th seed and they beat number 3 Miami. They went, I think, to the Sweet 16 and they lost there, but on the Elite 8. And then this year they went on a nice little run and beat the number 1 team in the Big East, University of Illinois. And Big East is, arguably one of the best conferences in college basketball. So you saw teams like that and, a few other smaller schools, really exceed. And we saw some upsets and we saw some, I think, talent really show that who's really going to declare for the draft after March Madness. And Nick, I just kind of want to go back to you and get your thoughts on how you think March Madness was ran and what you like to see.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, great points there, and loved the idea that you brought up in terms of some of the smaller schools that have really excelled this year, and obviously that happens every year, right? We have Cinderella stories with, going back to the one off the top of my head is George Mason back in 2006 making that Final Four run. That's something that I'll always remember with Jim Larinaga and that team. But what my main points were is the maybe overachievement of a conference like the Pac-12
Right.
where you have a team like UCLA that was picked to win their conference. I'll give them that.
Hmm.
But nobody had them in the Final Four unless, somebody was looking into the future.
Right.
And maybe a regression or an overhype of a conference like the Big Ten. Schools like Illinois, Michigan, that I'm sure a lot of people had not maybe just to win the championship, but also in their Final Four brackets. And, ultimately, there you go. Couldn't get it done, though, right?
No, we couldn't.
Could not get it done. So I really, where I thought this tournament was going to go to where we are today, there's a 50-50 split in my mind of, I can see where we're at now. And also a lot of things happened that I wasn't expecting. Teams like Oregon State, who were picked to finish dead last in their conference, or one of the, very, very, bottom tier, not much to be expected to make the Elite Eight. Teams like USC, Oregon doing really well.
Yeah.
And really that resurgence, I think, of the West Coast establishing themselves as a basketball powerhouse, man, with the types of talent and the schools that they have. So that was one thing that I really enjoyed. I'd like to swing it over to Nicholas here and kind of hear his thoughts on the tournament so far, and what has been some of the things that has surprised him.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Pac-12 as well. I mean, it's just one of the single best conference performances I think we've seen in years in March Madness, with UCLA and Oregon State and Oregon and USC as well being able to meet up in a Sweet 16 matchup. I thought was really, really cool. And the tournament overall, I think, given the times, like Jordan said, has done phenomenal with just the one game not being able to play with Oregon and TCU, with TCU unfortunately having to pull out of its game. And quite frankly, in a situation that probably could have been avoided with the A-10 tournament based on some of the hotel situations that was coming out and some of the reporting there. But I mean, this has probably been one of the craziest tournaments I can recall in the NCAA tournament, with upsets left and right. Teams like Oral Roberts pulling off an incredible run. I mean, I think this is going to be remembered as one of the craziest tournaments we've seen in quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And if they go the way I expect it to, it could have quite the memorable champion as well in a team like the Gonzaga Bulldogs.
Yeah, Nick, that's an excellent point. And you mentioned Gonzaga, obviously rolling right now, at least in the games that they've played so far, dominating on the offensive side of the ball. I really have never seen anything like that in terms of how many ways that they can beat you. I'd like to actually swing it over to Erwin and get his perspective on, as a player, when you can feel that energy of hey, we're rolling right now and we're making shots and our system is working out, where if we just do what we're supposed to do, we're going to end up winning this game. Tell me how you kind of balance that feeling with the pressure of getting to something like, I know you played in an SEC or you won the SEC title, regular season title. Like, tell me how you kind of balance that as a player in terms of pressure versus, success on the court.
I think the overall thing, you have to, as a player, you feed off the crowd, you feed off the energy. And I know that, the fans are a critical part of the game. And, this year for teams not to have as many fans as they could. I mean, I think overall, this season and the tournaments has been going really, really well. In me, I played hard whether it was 5 people in the crowd or whether it was 20,000 people in the crowd. I played that way. But you had other guys on my team. They played, that I played with over years. They feed off the energy from the crowd or whatever. And so, but also too, like you feed off the energy, but that also will build pressure up in you sometimes too, and you'll put too much pressure on yourself to be able to perform. So sometimes you have to kind of dial down that energy that you have as a player, and you have to kind of like enjoy the moment for what it is, because sometimes you can get too worked up as a player or whatever, and take yourself out of the game, and to get your mind out of it.
Yeah. All excellent points there. And loved your perspective, at least from a player side of it, because like you said, it's hard to simulate that pressure with, arena filled with 20,000 fans versus, what are they letting in? 25%, I think, Jordan?
Yeah, I think 25%.
Yeah, something like that. So, but even in the moment, like, I'm sure, players understand, hey, that, you know, this is the Final Four, and this is something we've been dreaming of since we were kids. So, you know, getting yourself hyped up, I think, is not going to be the issue. It's you know, keeping a level playing field and do what we do best, right? And I think that's something that I particularly have been really impressed with Gonzaga, as they've just steamrolled through everyone, not had a single moment of you know, question or doubt, weakness. Yeah, exactly, Jordan. So, you know, Nicholas, I want to swing it back to you with this matchup in particular, and we can go ahead and you know, kind of get into the nitty gritty details of UCLA and Gonzaga. From UCLA's perspective, how like you've, you know, they've seen Gonzaga play as well. How can you go about attacking them? Like what is their weakness, and how is UCLA going to be able to stay in this game?
Well, I think that UCLA has quite the tall task ahead of themselves. And one of the things I would recommend to the Bruins is don't try to focus on just one player. Because if you try to do that, you are setting yourself up for failure. Because what's so special about this Gonzaga team is that it is not just one or two guys. Between players like Timmy, Suggs, Kispert, and Netport, and also Joy I as well, any one of those players can go off on any given night to have a fantastic performance. So you have to really focus on the entire team as a whole, which is a really tough task that you're going to have to really go through. What Johnny Juicing and Cody Riley have done in this NCAA tournament, if even one of those guys don't perform well, it is going to be very ugly. And, you know, the 14 points, you know, I think that is a pretty accurate line here, because, I mean, even the Gonzaga-USC game, I think plenty of people have thought that USC would have given Gonzaga a better game than what they ended up doing, and that just did not happen. So I really think that 14-point line you mentioned earlier in the program is pretty accurate. And just for UCLA being in this position in the Final Four is fantastic for the Bruins. They are going to have to really ensure that their defense puts in a full effort on everybody on the floor, not just one or two people. Because if you try double teaming one or two guys, you're setting yourself up for failure just based on the entire effort of that Gonzaga team. It's one of the best starting lineups that I really can recall. It is just every single guy of that Gonzaga team can really just kill you in so many ways.
Yeah, all great points. And Jordan, I want to swing it over to you, and
Right.
I'd love for you and I to maybe play devil's advocate here. Now, I know you're wearing a Michigan shirt, but this UCLA team has overcome a lot, right, in this tournament. Obviously surprised a lot of people. And you know, Nicholas, you just mentioned, you know, the 14-point spread. I believe they were a 15-point underdog against Alabama, you know, 6 or 8 points against Michigan State. I don't think they've been favored in any game they've played in so far, which would reflect the 11 seed that they have. Tell me what it's been about UCLA that has impressed you, Jordan, and tell me, you know, if you were coaching UCLA right now, you know, what would be your message to your team in the locker room?
Well, I think UCLA plays with a lot of heart. They play with the chip on their shoulder. You know, they have a big name, but they haven't had a lot of success over the years. And one person that comes to mind, I think, is Cody Riley. If you guys aren't familiar with Cody Riley, a couple of years back was in Guangzhou, China, and he was got arrested for stealing Louis Vuitton sunglasses with LiAngelo Ball. Now, Cody Riley sat out the first 2 years, and now he's making a huge impact on the UCLA team. So when you have driven players and driven people that are now, we're kind of behind the scenes for a little bit, now coming up front and really sticking their neck out and performing the way they have, and to continuously being known that, you know, people are looking at them like, you're not going to win this game. And they're going to go, well, you know, we've sat out and we watched everything, you know, happen these past couple of years. You know, we're going to make something out of this. And clearly we've seen it. I think they just play with a lot of heart, and they obviously they have extremely amount of talented guys. UCLA recruits extremely well. I think they're a Pac-12, correct? Yeah, the Pac-12 school. They recruit, you know, nobody that goes to a Pac-12 school is short of any talent. I mean, these guys are, you know, extremely talented. And, you know, there's a couple different people that come to mind. Johnny Juicing, I think that's his name. Great size, great ability. I like him, you know, basically anywhere on the floor. And you have players like that will continuously move them forward, and kind of steamroll and see where they'll go. Now, I don't have UCLA going very far past this, but I do see a lot of potential in them.
Yeah, all great points there. And something I wanted to particularly ask Erwin about is being on the other side of the coin, right? Like you are the team that's nobody's picking to win this game. Everybody's, on social media talking about how Gonzaga is just going to dominate you and blow you out by 14 points. As a player, how do you overcome something like that? I know it's that, us against the world mentality, but from your perspective, how would you kind of describe that? What things are going to go, conversations in the locker room?
I know personally, if I was when I was in a situation like that, you use it as motivation, and you try to you rally all your teammates up as well. Because at the end of the day, you put work in as a team just like any other team. Of course, that other team may have a better record than you, but you put work in just like they have. And so you have to channel the underdog role and go out and play. I've been in situations like that where I've been told, or the team been told, like, yeah, they got losing by 20, 30 points, but at the same time, you can never underestimate a team that's down. With UCLA, they played in. I think they played in the play-in game at first, right, and then they made it to the round of 64, and then they came in. I didn't expect them to beat us, and they came in and they beat us. So that was so unexpected. And then them to come in this last game, the way they played Michigan, it was unreal. And like I said, those guys, they have a chip on their shoulder. They have something that they want to prove. The kid Johnny Jazang, he's playing really well. He transferred from Kentucky, and went back home. And going back home, that's always a special thing to you to be able to play in front of your home crowd, your home team. That's something special. So I think he definitely has a chip on his shoulder. And then the other kid, Riley, he talked about, that's something within itself because, him doing that could have took him out of basketball, for his rest of his, forever. But, he's back on the court playing and he has a fire in him and that's pushing him as well.
Yeah, all great points. And it's awesome just to hear of the player's perspective, right? Because it can't feel good, right? But also on the flip side, right? Like it's like, all right, like okay, is that what you think? Like I'm gonna prove you wrong, and I think that's UCLA's mentality this entire run that they've had, right? And going up against a team like Alabama, who just came off, lights out performance against Maryland and stop them from what they do best. And Jordan, to your point, they play with a lot of heart, but I think one thing that sets UCLA apart the most is they take away what you do best. And that's what they've proven to me throughout this tournament so far. Now, I will say it's hard. It's hard to take away what Gonzaga does best because they do everything good. They're not shooting it well, they can play the pick and roll game and drive to the basket. If they're shooting it well from 3-pointers, well, good luck, But I think that if UCLA has an opportunity in this game to make it a dirty, low scoring, exactly the model on how they beat Michigan, I think that's really their only hope. Now, in my opinion, I don't think that's going to happen, but I guess we'll have to see there. Shifting over to the other side of things and starting with you again, Nicholas, number 2 seed Houston. Number 2 seed, that's a high seed. I don't think a lot of people picked them to make it to the Final Four. Going up against a 1 seed in Baylor, that's been impressive throughout the entire year. Obviously in the Big 12. What are your initial thoughts about this matchup? 2 teams from Texas, which I think is really intriguing. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts there.
Yeah, and just to go off your point, I think one of the reasons why many people did not pick Houston to reach this level because they were put up with Illinois in the Midwest region. Loyola Chicago really did Houston a favor to sort of make that path a lot easier. But this particular matchup, the Baylor Bears in particular have been keyed on as one of the top 2 teams in college basketball all season long. And it starts with Jared Butler. What can he not do? If it wasn't for guys like Cade Cunningham, he probably would have easily been the Big 12 Player of the Year. But it's not just him as well. Davion Mitchell, exceptional guard. Adam Flagler, Mikal Teague. Those are 4 guys right there that are really, really good. And for Houston, it's going to come down to what Quentin Grimes will do. He is a really good guard. Not going to take anything away from what he's done because his performances have been pretty darn good in this NCAA tournament, as KenPom has him as the MVP in 3 of the 4 games that Houston's played in this NCAA tournament. It's just going to be one of those matchups that when you put Grimes up against someone like Jared Butler, I just don't know if Grimes will have it. And another key point I'm going to be looking at particularly is the rebounding for both of these teams. Defensively, not necessarily the best for both of these teams, but offensively, we were looking at 2 of the top 10 teams in the country in offensive rebounding percentage. The team that takes control of the rebounding the most could very well win this game. And I definitely would not take Houston out of this as much as I'm taking UCLA out of it against Gonzaga almost before the ball tips. I think that the 5-point spread you mentioned earlier, I think it could be a closer game than that. I've been high on Houston pretty much all year long. And I'm not saying that Houston's going to win this game whatsoever. I think Baylor should win this thing. But I would not be shocked if this one went down to the final possession and Houston really put themselves in the map. I think we're looking at a very good Houston team that, quite frankly, has been under the radar, at least to the casual fan, just because they are in the American Athletic Conference. And they are, for the most part, dominating teams except for a few losses here or there in the conference slate.
Yeah, Nicholas, all fantastic points. And what you said that really resonated with me is if we took Gonzaga out of this, right? Like if Gonzaga didn't exist, this would be a really, really exciting final, in my opinion. Like because it's you're right. They're the stylistic that they both play, high flying. They're not afraid to get physical in terms of rebounding and things like that. So this is what my ideal final would have been, obviously, if Gonzaga didn't exist. Now, I want to pass it to you, Jordan, in that. And something that you mentioned, Nicholas, is the non-Power 5, right? So to the casual fan, not a lot of people watch Houston. And I think that in any scenario, in all of sports, whether that be
right.
college basketball, college football, or anything else, non-Power 5 schools always play with a chip on their shoulder because they don't get the recognition that I think they deserve a lot of the time. So when you're going up against a team that, like Baylor, that's been, picked to be here since the very beginning of the season, hasn't, really dropped out of that top 5. What's the pressure from Baylor's perspective to win this game because they've been picked to do so well for so long? And also from Houston's perspective, they're kind of playing with house money here. So talk to me a little bit about that dynamic.
Well, one thing I'm really going to give it to Houston, and Nicholas touched on, is if Houston can wear Baylor down to the last second, Houston has a better defense. They have Marcus Sass, who is one of the best defenders in college basketball right now. He really held it against his own against Syracuse, and there's a couple other guys that if Houston can kind of wear Baylor down, Baylor is known for stamina. They can go for a long period of time and they can, kind of bring the score up. But if Houston can limit that and go down the fourth quarter, I think if it's a fourth quarter game between both teams, I think Houston would take it. Just out of heart and passion. And, so I'm not taking it away from Baylor. Baylor's a great team. And, they have definitely have some talented guys and a good lineup. But I think it's just when it comes down to chip on the shoulder, no one's really thinking of Houston when it comes to college basketball. But more people are thinking of Baylor. So Houston's definitely going to go out with a chip on their shoulder. And I think it goes down to a fourth quarter game. They're definitely going to win it.
I love your points there, and want to pass it over to Erwin and kind of get your thoughts as well on this matchup, and what are you most excited to see from Baylor and Houston's perspective?
Well, I mean, in the beginning when I did my bracket, I actually had Gonzaga winning, but as more as I watched the tournament, I started to fall more and more in love with Houston. Kevin Sampson, I think he's done an awesome job, with the program down there. I watched him back when he was in Oklahoma. I watched him for a while and, watched how he turned that program around. And then for him to come in Houston and do the same thing, I think it's unbelievable. Their players, like you said a second ago, their players play with a chip on their shoulder as well. But their players are really athletic too, and they can guard the ball and they can rebound the basketball too. They play really good defense. So I think it'll come down. I think it'll come down to a last few seconds of the game. Especially with it being 2 Texas teams. I think that'll bring a little bit more anxiety between the teams or whatever, because it's 2 Texas teams. So you definitely know you're gonna play hard as you can against a team that's from your home state.
Yeah, for sure. And on a quick side note there, I'm sure you all saw the news about Chris Beard heading from Texas Tech to the University of Texas. I thought that was really interesting. Now I know he's a Texas guy, and he graduated from the UT and all of that stuff. But to go from a program that you built up, basically from nothing, had a finals appearance not too long ago, and then kind of taking that rival job, I guess you could say. I just thought that was really interesting, and not to get too sidetracked here, but Nicholas, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Well, yeah, something that I tweeted out is that no matter what happens the rest of this offseason, I believe this is the best offseason hire in all the country. I think that in an era to where you don't necessarily have to build your roster through just recruiting, you have to also do the transfer portal. You actually have to build a roster. Chris Beard is the best roster builder in all college basketball, and I think. So I think that Texas has hit the home run. I think that Chris Beard is going to deliver Texas what Shaka Smart should have delivered with that Texas team this season. Obviously, the Longhorns this year getting upset by Abilene Christian. I think Chris Beard's going to do a lot more and continue his roster building. And here's the thing, too. Like, if he could convince some of the best transfers to go to Lubbock, Texas, think about what he can do convincing those guys to go to Austin, Texas, and the University of Texas. I think he's got now a lot more points he can bring up to these recruits, and I think he really is one of the best roster builders in all of college basketball. What he's done has been brilliant.
Yeah, Nicholas, that's a fantastic point. Coming from a guy that lives in Austin but has also visited Lubbock, I can tell you that is not going to be a hard sell at all based on what he's used to. One thing you mentioned there is the transfer portal, something that is going to play more and more of a factor into college basketball as a whole. Jordan, I know this was something that we were talking about pre-show. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts and what do you think the future is of this sport now that the transfer portal has been, such a prominent factor in it?
Well, I think it's for people who are transferring, I think it's a great opportunity for them to get out and venture new opportunities. And hopefully, if it's not working with the program, then they can get recognition somewhere else. But one thing that kind of boggled my mind when it came to transfer portal is freshman University of Illinois guard Adam Miller has now entered the transfer portal, and there's rumors that he is going to go to Duke. He crosstown rivals with DJ Stewart, who went to Duke, and now he declared for the 2021 NBA draft. Now they're saying that Adam Miller might go to Duke, but what kind of boggled my mind is he actually had decent amount of success. University of Illinois had one of the best runs they've had since Darren Williams. I think that was in 2003. And so for him to transfer is kind of a shocker. There's some other players too that, looking to possibly go to other schools. And I think it's a great way for, other people to get different recognition, and it keeps college basketball and alive.
Yeah, I think it's not just from college basketball's perspective, but college football as well. And just and I'd love to hear actually Erwin's thoughts on this. As an athlete, your options now are so much more wide open than you were playing ball, right? Like if something's not working out or you want to try somewhere else or whatever that may be, whereas in the past you can't really make that call, or you're going to have to sit out. Now it's much more fluid, much more up front. And one thing too that I'd love to talk about is this idea of name, image, and likeness that I think is going to play a huge factor in these decisions as well. But Erwin, from your perspective, what are your thoughts on the transport portal? And as a player, let's say we had these rules back when you were playing. Is this something that you would have ever looked into? Oh, Erwin, you're on mute there.
I'm sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I've been looking at this transfer portal. Man, it's probably, I think it's right at 1,000 kids right now. And I'm like, man, all these kids are transferring. I'm like, you have that many kids in 1 year that's really that unhappy. And so, I mean, you look at, like I seen today, another kid, he's leaving from Florida to go into, to enter into the draft or whatever. I mean, 6 guys from Florida to leave. I mean, that's like something that's unheard of in, other schools. And so it's just going to be, a lot of teams being able to kind of pick pick who they want. Pick their like, I want this guy, I want that guy. And they can kind of almost make a all-star team, I think. With that being said, with so many guys being out there in the transfer portal. And as far as when I was coming through, like me myself personally, like I never thought about transferring. Like I loved Alabama from the first day that I touched down on campus until the day that I left, and I still love them now. I just had a fun time. I just felt like, I just wanted to make it work out. I had teammates that they ended up transferring, leaving out, just to go to a better situation. You'll have one or two guys, but some programs they're having like 4, 5, and 6 guys to leave. And I understand too that they're looking, they're looking at, okay, I can go back, go to another school, and I can, possibly, get my, revamp my career and show my talent and get more experience too. And a lot of guys are waiting on that this name and the image, and they're waiting on that as well because they want to get paid off of that. And as far as that right there, I think that because the universities and stuff, they make so much money off of their name and likeness. I do think that they should receive something. And don't get me wrong. I know that they're education as well that's taken care of. But I do think that I think it should be all across the board though. I think that. And so, I think it should be like, I won't say all across the board. I say it'd be a tier. So I say you have the top guys or whatever, because you don't want, I don't know, for example, I think, like, for example, Smith, Deontay Smith, I think he will get more than, than I don't know, just to say another, for example, walk on. No offense to the walk on, but his name and imaging, he's bringing more value. He'll bring more value to the university. He's with his name, whatever, versus anyone else, whatever. So I think he should be like one of the guys in the top tier. Then he should have another second tier. Then he should have a third tier, whatever, and just kind of go from there. Because I don't think that I don't think everybody, just like any other job, everybody don't get the same amount of money. You have different levels, and you just kind of go like that.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point, Erwin, and kind of just sparked my thinking here in that I think it's going to spread the wealth in terms of talent across the country a lot more than we've seen in the past. Obviously, in any sport, you're going to have the blue chips. For college basketball, Duke, UNC, Georgetown. I don't know why that just came to mind because they haven't been relevant for a while, but you know what I mean? Syracuse, you have these blue blood programs that are always going to recruit really, really well. But I think that something that like name, image, and likeness is going to spread the wealth even further, because would you rather be a big fish at a little pond? So let's say you're a 5-star recruit and you go to Houston or you go to Stephen F. Austin or something like that. The amount of jerseys and sales and things like that you're going to generate because you're the best player on that team is going to be through the roof. Whereas if you go to Duke, you're surrounded by other 5-stars, that in terms of your NIL, what your value is to that team might be a little bit less. So would you want to be the big fish in a smaller pond, go play, non-Power 5 or a school that's not traditionally that good at college basketball and be the it factor for that team? Or is it more important for you to go to a blue chip program, learn from, Krzyzewski and some of the greatest coaches of all time, and maybe decrease how much your initial value is going to be before you make that jump to the NBA? I just think it's a really interesting correlation there. And Jordan, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on it as well.
Well, when you talked about, wanting to be a big fish in a little pond, I think we've seen that before. High school commits where, go somewhere that you wouldn't really think they would go. UTEP, people go to UTEP, Houston, they go to Western Kentucky, or they'll go to Central Michigan, but you see that they're a star there. And, at the back, if you took a bench player from Duke, one doesn't come to mind, but if you took the end of the bench, if you took him, he would be a star at Western Michigan, or he would be a star at, anywhere, Houston, UTEP, he would be a star. So, it's interesting when you said big fish, little pond. And I think some of these players just want to learn from the best. They want to learn from that kid who was an ESPN top 100, that he was always number 1, number 2. They want to learn from him. So maybe they could catch up to him and, have a better future for themselves. So I think it's a good point. And people who transfer, I think, have a little bit more of an edge. They want to do more than just play college basketball. They either want to play in the NBA, play in the G League, or they want to go overseas. So these people transferring, I think, are people, you'll see playing professional basketball. So it's a good way for everybody to kind of to get noticed.
Yeah, I love your points there, and in the end, it benefits the players, right? And if it benefits the players, I'm all in for that. And I think everybody on this panel could agree with that. So, however we can make it better on the players, men and women, in any collegiate sport, like I'm all for that. So, just jumping back here, we did get a question from the chat that I want to start with Nicholas to get his opinion on. Will Stephen F. Austin make the tournament next year? Obviously, a big upset against the University of Texas this year, but what is the outlook for that program moving forward?
Well, I think what Stephen F. Austin is having to go through is not just having to build a roster like everyone else. They're also going to a new conference next year in the Western Athletic Conference, and they're taking so many other programs with them. So what Stephen F. Austin does with some of the better teams in the Southland Conference that'll be joining them, but also the likes of Grand Canyon University. I think that's going to make for a very intriguing year one and further down the line. I think that Stephen F. Austin is going to be in a very interesting spot. Now, they're going to have to build the roster like everyone else in the country through the transfer portal through recruits. So, I mean, given the scope of the transfer portal and given the scope that basically has been created by the NCAA in this particular year because of the one-time waiver on transfers, I think that's going to really make it to where I can't say anything much until we get an actual roster built out. Because I can guarantee you, just going through my rundown for the next College Basketball Bonanza program, in the middle of this piece of paper is my section of the transfer portal, and I can guarantee you this will be completely filled in with small text as I write things down throughout the week. That has become the scope now of this transfer portal. It's unreal what in this particular year, it's absolutely crazy, crazier than rush hour or nearest interstate highway. And it's going to be one of those spots to where we're going to be filling out rosters here well after the season ends. It's going to be fascinating to see what Stephen F. Austin can come up with. And I'll just be interested to see what they can do in the Western Athletic Conference. I think that they could potentially be in a good spot.
Yeah, all crazy points there with the transfer portal and everything that you brought up. But the last point I want to talk about from Stephen F. Austin's perspective, and it really ties into the whole theme, I guess, of one of these conversations that we've had is think about Texas as a state. You think of football, right? Texas is such a football dominated state.
Yeah.
Stephen F. Austin, Baylor, UT going into the tournament this year, Texas Tech. Like how much noise they've made from a basketball perspective. And obviously we have the dominance of the Pac-12, where when I grew up in the Northeast, that was traditionally kind of the powerhouse, I guess you could think of college basketball. The St. John's, the Seton Halls, the Georgetowns, Maryland. I think that the power has shifted somewhat from what was traditional, and I guess in the 80s and the 90s. To what we're seeing now, which I think is a really interesting shift. Gentlemen, we don't have too much time left. I want to tie it back to the games on Saturday. Starting with you, Erwin, I want you to pick your winners and why, if you want to tie that in.
I got Gonzaga. Beating UCLA. I think their run is about to come to an end. I think that they played with a lot of courage, a lot of heart over the last few weeks. But I think that Gonzaga will have a little bit too much for them. This coming weekend and in a few days, and I think that I definitely don't think they're gonna hang with the Gonzaga. I think they'll start off with hanging with them, but I think the talent that Gonzaga has, I think they're overpowering. As far as Houston and Baylor, I mean, like I told you before, I like Baylor. I really like Houston. I really like Houston. I mean, they just bring a different dynamic to the court. Just watching them over the last few weeks, they play really well as a team. They play hard. They can guard. They can rebound. They can score the basketball. I think it'll be a nail biter, but I think Houston gets it at the end.
Love it. So what we would call an upset in that second game, I think that's definitely plausible and would love to see it. Going to you, Nicholas, same question. Pick your winners and why.
Yeah, I think Gonzaga is just going to be way too much for UCLA to handle. Quite frankly, I would take the 14 points, to be perfectly honest, as far as those that may want some betting advice. I would completely take those 14 points. Baylor and Houston, I mean, I've liked this Baylor team all year long. I think I have to really stick with that here, despite what Houston's be able to bring to the table on defense. I think that matchup of Baylor offense versus Houston defense is extremely intriguing. I like Baylor just a little bit more. And I think that a Gonzaga-Baylor national championship game, a game that was originally postponed in one of the first weeks of the season, would just be the ultimate screw you to this pandemic. And I am rooting for that to happen. I think that Gonzaga is going to end up taking that. And if Gonzaga wins this national championship, I think they're going to enter the discussion for one of the all-time champions to be able to complete a perfect season should they get the job done.
Yeah, I love it. I loved your point there, Nicholas, about a game that was originally postponed and what everybody was kind of penciling in at the beginning of the season, because so much has changed since then, externally, the sport itself, the tournament, all these things. And in the very end, as a sports fan, I'm just happy that we got an opportunity to see it, right? And so, everybody dogs the NCAA, and we were talking about this pre-show, but yeah, big shouts to them for getting this done, getting the season in, getting us to a Final Four when, back in July, a lot of this was in question. So, shouts to the medical staff and the teams that followed the protocols and all of that stuff. Last but certainly not least, Jordan, same question to you. Pick your winners and why.
I'm going to have a Gonzaga just because I think they're a beast, and nobody can really hang with them. In my opinion, I think that they're going to, really do a good job. And, Nicholas made some great points that, everybody on that team is a beast. And if one person is falling down or, he's having a bad game, that anybody can step up at any time, at any moment. Now, unfortunately, me personally, I cannot say the same about UCLA. I think it needs to be a group of 3, 4. I think it's their starting lineup, that really needs to be going at all times. They need to be on the same page in order for them to make a win. And then out of Houston and Baylor, I'm going to have to go Houston. Only reason why is because they have a better defense. And if it's a fourth quarter game, as I said before, and it's a close, or it's not fourth quarter, but you get what I mean. At the end of the game, Houston's going to run them out. They have better endurance and better defense. So I think Houston's going to take that.
Love it. So we got 2 people picking Houston. I love that. 2 people picking the upset. For me personally, I am taking Gonzaga as well. However, from the betting perspective, I would take the points. I think that's a lot of points, even for a team like Gonzaga, and in this big of a moment with a team like UCLA. I just think even if the game's out of reach, they're going to try to keep it, relatively close. So I would take the points on that. I loved both Erwin and Jordan, your points about Houston. I agree. They're scrappy. Their defense is what I love. And, the common cliche, defense is how you win championships. But Baylor has just been so impressed, from my perspective, all through the whole season. It's really hard. It's really hard to be picked to go to the Final Four in November and then actually do it. So I'm going to pick the Baylor Bears there to win it in a close one. But I do think they cover that game as well. So, gentlemen, it's been great. I've really enjoyed this. I hope we can get a chance to do it again. And I hope you guys have a great weekend, a great Easter Sunday. Just to do our quick outro here, you can follow us on Twitter at the Sportscast1 and visit us on our website, thesportscast.net. Make sure to check out our show schedule throughout the week. This is Nick Rossetti.